Appreciate everybody coming out today. Representative Jim Landtroop from Plainview. If you haven't met him, I want you to meet him. He's a good guy. I've gotten to know him a bit over the last few months. And what I like about him and why I'm here supporting him, why I wanted to be a part of him coming to town is he's our kind of folk. He's got a good shoulder on his head. He is, even if he is running for public office. And, what I found with him is there's not any issue that we brought up, or in all the meetings that we sat through today, and banker meetings we were in before, and other meetings where I've heard him talk about issues, there's not any issue that he hasn't given some good thought to. Obviously there are issues that he's not going to know everything about, but he's not a yes man. He's not here to tell you what you want to hear. Out here in rural America, that's what we need. We don't need somebody just to tell us what we want to hear and then go on down the road and do their own thing. He has exhibited some leadership that is exceptional in his term in Austin. He doesn't just go along with the flow. He doesn't just go along with this side or that side. And we talked about some of the ways he's done that during the day today. He did what he believed was right. And that's, you know, I'm a little bit country, and I just kind of think that's the way we ought to do things, what we believe is right. And so we're glad to have him here. Our good friend Victor Leal came down today. Victor also has known Jim for a long time, and I want to welcome Victor. And Victor, you got anything to add to that?
Well, I told Jim, Jim has been a good friend, and our ideologies line up in a whole lot of ways. I wish you'd gotten to meet his wife, Kathy, and his family as well. I'm sure that'll happen in the future. But I'm here to support him. I don't know if it's better for me to endorse your opponent. Maybe that'll get you more support. Whatever works. I'm willing to do. But I do want to see Jim get elected to this district. I think it's important that we have somebody that understands rural West Texas, the issues that are important to us. Obviously, this town is near and dear to my heart. This is, we go on and on about how good this community has been to our family in particular, but it's a great place. Jim, as you come to know now with some of the folks that you've gotten to meet, and you'll get to visit a lot more. But I'm here to ask you to just real blunt to support him. I'm going to do all I can to see that he gets elected to continue. I'll be a little more particular about what Jay was saying, some of the leadership that he's exhibited. He right out of the bat, he did things like didn't necessarily vote for our speaker. He didn't vote for our speaker, the Joe Strauss, because of some issues that he had. And it's real easy when you see things going a certain way to jump on a ship that you feel like is going to go a certain way. But he campaigned a certain way, and he's always stuck by that. We visited a lot with Gene earlier, and some of the stands that he took against the Republican leadership on a lot of the votes that he stood up for, that represented his district, the schools in his district. I think were courageous, and you don't see enough of that, in Austin. I don't know if you see any of it in Washington, but I'm proud and honored to be associated with him, and I'm glad he's here today. So, yeah, thanks for being here.
All right, I'll stand to give my spiel, but then I'm going to sit back down because what I want this to be is just more of a conversation. I think that's the best way that you guys can get to know me is by asking me questions. And so instead of me standing up and rambling for a half an hour or whatever and actually not addressing any issues that are important to you, I want to make sure that you can ask me questions and get to know me and my heart and kind of the way I view things. Just to give you some background information, I am from Plainview. I'm a State Farm agent in Plainview. I've been in business all my adult life, so although I'm an elected official, I don't really count myself as a politician. I just count myself as a businessman who happens to be an elected official. I understand what it's like to make a payroll, to work off a budget, to not spend more than you have. I understand the harmful effects of regulation and higher taxes on businesses and trying to create jobs and grow the economy. I've been married for 19 years to my beautiful wife, Kathy. We have 4 children. a 16-year-old boy, 2 15-year-old boys, and an 11-year-old girl. And so, you know, I understand as a family guy also, you know, the effects of taxes and what that does to a family's budget. I understand the medical payments, you know, the grocery bill. I would say, you know, the grocery bill every month, but we actually have a grocery bill with 3 teenage boys, you know, 2 or 3 times a month. So, you know, I understand all that. So I understand what the people are going through and what small businesses in rural Texas are going through, trying to, especially in this economy. I do count it as a privilege to have served in the Texas House. In my time there, I have served on the Defense and Veteran Affairs Committee and the Agriculture and Livestock Committee. I was also chosen by my peers to serve on the Republican Policy Caucus Committee. And what that was a committee we met every morning and would go over the bills that were going to be up on the floor that day and make recommendations to the Republican Party on kind of what our stances were on those bills. I was also vice chairman of the Rural Caucus. I was chosen as the 4th most conservative member of the entire legislature. And, you know, we had to make some tough votes. I mean, it wasn't an easy session, and as Victor said, there were several times that you know, there were some bills that leadership supported. There were Republican bills, and leadership supported them, and a lot of people supported them, but I didn't because I didn't think they were good for my communities or my schools or really rural West Texas in general. My basic philosophy about government is that government is not the solution, government is the problem. The solution lies with the people that live out in our communities. If the government would get out of our way and let the people do what they do best, we'd all be much better off. And that's kind of what I filter everything through when I'm up there. Now, I'll tell you a couple things we did when it comes to the budget. You know, we started with, well, we ended with a $15 billion budget deficit that we had to address when session started. And we were going to do that a couple of ways. One, we're going to raise taxes to the tune of $15 billion to the people of the state of Texas. We were going to cut $15 billion out of government spending, or we were going to do some combination. Well, when I ran and got elected, I promised that I would not vote for a budget that raised taxes. And I didn't. We actually balanced the budget by cutting $15 billion out of government spending. And I supported that budget. Now, there's a second part to that budget called the Fiscal Matters Bill. And that's the bill that tells you how you're going to spend the money that we voted on in, you know, cutting the $15 billion. And I actually did not support that bill. That bill, it had all the cuts to education in it, which I didn't agree with. It had stuff like allocating $250 million over the next 10 years to build a Formula One racetrack in Austin, Texas. It had stuff about subsidizing Fortune 500 companies to film commercials in Texas. And I thought that's irresponsible of us to vote or pass a bill that is building racetracks and filming commercials when we're having to cut education, health care, and all these other agencies in the state. And really nobody kind of got, corrections actually kind of came out the best, but, and you asked the chief, they're not smelling like a rose either. Really nobody was off limits in this, and it was a tough decision. It was probably the hardest vote I had to take, simply for the fact that these are people that I see at the grocery store, at church, at school, through my business, you know, that are affected by these cuts. But I do believe for the long-term success of our state, it was the right thing to do at the right time, was not to raise taxes. So my faith is very, very important to me. One of the things we did in the budget also, and I don't know if y'all were aware of this, but in previous budgets and in the original budget this time, there was $65 million that was of your taxpayer money that was allocated to fund abortion clinics. And there's a group of us, actually about 12 of us, that just, you know, that just didn't sit right with us. So we fought that through the regular session, fought it through the special session, went all the way to the Lieutenant Governor's office, and we won. And we were successful in taking that $65 million and putting it into women's health programs, but taking it out of it going to fund abortion clinics in the state of Texas. And I think if you're like me and believe that life was created by God and has value, then that was a huge win for us. We dealt with Second Amendment issues. We dealt with eminent domain. We dealt with water. We dealt with immigration. We tried to deal with everything. One of the things we did that no legislature before us could do was pass a photo voter ID bill. And throughout the ages, men and women have served and bled and died for our right to vote as citizens of the United States and of Texas. And I think the least we could do to honor that sacrifice was to pass a photo voter ID bill, just requiring people to show they are who they say they are in order to cast a vote. So there were a lot of conservative things that were accomplished, but there's a lot of work still to be done. And I was walking, and as we were going around today meeting with people, there's a lot of issues still out there that we need to deal with. And what I want to do, really, and what we've done earlier today, is just listen. I think sometimes politicians talk too much and listen too little. So I want to listen to you guys, for you to tell me what's important, tell me how I can help you, do whatever your job is, help you do it better or easier or more efficiently. And I do just want this to be a conversation, because that's the way you get to know people. You sit down and have a conversation with them. You can't know somebody by just either them lecturing to you or you lecturing to them. So I'll be here as long as y'all want to stay here and just visit. And I want you to, hopefully when you leave here, you'll feel like that you know me a little bit better. Because that's the key. That's the way to make it all work, is to build relationships and to know each other. So when I'm down in Austin, you feel comfortable calling me. And when you call me, you know me. It's not just some blank face down there that you're talking to, but it's somebody that you actually have a relationship with. So Jay and Victor, thank you for arranging this today and taking me around and introducing me to people and having this available for the people here and for me as well. I appreciate it. And if we can't get to everything today, let's up to doing it again at some other time. And I'm going to go ahead and sit down, but I'm going to keep talking just for a second, because one of your questions may be about redistricting, and nobody really knows anything about redistricting yet. For me, I don't think it's an issue of what the district's going to be like. I think our district is what it is. I don't think it's going to change in the courts. So it's more just an issue of when the election is actually going to take place. I can tell you this. There's two courts. There's the San Antonio Federal Court that's talking about, they're in charge of kind of the interim map. And then there's a Washington, D.C. court that's in charge of pre-clearance of the map that we drew as a legislature. And they're going on simultaneously. The San Antonio court told the parties, being the state and all the plaintiffs, that if they need to come to an agreement by, I think, Monday, if they wanted to keep the April 3rd primary. Well, I don't think there's really any incentive on either one of their sides to compromise at this point in time. So I don't see that as likely. And I think what the San Antonio court was hoping was that the D.C. court would come out and say, we're not going to pre-clear the map, because I really don't anticipate them doing that. I think they wanted them to say, we're not going to pre-clear the map because of these reasons, and have, whatever the reason, 4, 5, 6 reasons. And then San Antonio could use that as a guidance of how they draw their interim map. Well, last night, the Washington, D.C. court came out and said, we will not issue a ruling within the next 30 days. And so now the San Antonio court, they just want guidance, because they already drew one map and the Supreme Court kicked it out. So I think they're looking for guidance either from the parties involved in the lawsuit or the D.C. court, and they're not getting guidance from either one. So I think the April primary is less and less of a possibility every day. I don't know if it's going to go to June. I don't know if it's going to be pushed back later in April. I don't know if we're going to have split primaries. I mean, nobody really knows that yet. But I would be extremely surprised if it stayed an April primary, at least April 3rd. So I wish I could give you more information than that. It would be nice. I mean, everybody that's running for office wants to know, some want to know where they're running, but everybody wants to know when. But I think once that gets out, we'll have a better understanding of, and then and I think at that point you also start seeing a little more activity as far as maybe yard signs going out or different things like that. So, but I wish I could tell you more about redistricting. But when you're dealing with federal courts, you know, your guess is as good as mine. So, but with having that being said, I'd love to open it up for questions, and you can ask me. And it doesn't have to be political questions. You can ask me personal questions, business questions. I mean, whatever you want to, whatever question you think would give you a better insight into me, my character, my values, my beliefs. Please feel free to ask. So. But somebody has to be first. Who's going to be the courageous first one?
I didn't think Gene was through asking questions.
Well, no, but I do want to say I appreciate what you did for public schools. We didn't win that fight, but there weren't many people who spoke up for poor school districts, and you took a vote that wanted more equity in the system, and that was against what most of the Republican Party wanted. So I appreciate that. Maybe we'll get farther along next time.
Yeah.
Jim, I have a question for you. Being a state representative requires a tremendous amount of sacrifice. Even you being here today, you know, being away from your family, being away from your job and stuff like that. What is it that drives you, that motivates you? What is it that you really enjoy about serving in the state legislature?
You know, and I don't remember who said it, but somebody said, you know, you should always do something that's bigger than yourself. And as, you know, just watching kind of the way the country has been going, and then you see states like California and Illinois and Michigan and New Jersey and some of these states, they're just starting to kind of fall right in line. And for me, you know, I mentioned my kids, and this is really who I'm doing it for, my kids and, you know, hopefully someday my grandkids, not too soon, but someday grandkids. You know, I want them to have the opportunities in the future here that we've all had. You know, and if they move to Dallas, I want it to be because they wanted to, not because they had to. And in order to do that, we just have to have the right people fighting for us. And I'm kind of one of those guys that I think everybody should be involved at whatever level they can be involved. You know, some people it's you know, financially contributing. Some people it's just helping make phone calls or put out yard signs. Some people it's serving, and I just am fortunate to kind of have the job that will allow me that opportunity to serve. I'm not the kind of guy that just kind of sits back and watches things happen. I want to get involved and help shape the way things happen, and I just you know, I've just been blessed with the opportunity to be involved this way, and so to me it's a privilege. It's not, and you know, I don't want to downplay the sacrifice. But I look at our military, men and women overseas years at a time, putting their life on the line, and I just don't see this as much of a sacrifice compared to that.
Sure.
And so I think a lot of it is perspective, and so I just think this is the least I can do to give back to my community and my state and for my kids. Yes, sir.
Texas is one of the fastest growing states in the whole United States for a good reason. It's a good place to live. And because of that, it's going to take more money to do the things that are necessary in the state of Texas. Where do you see that money coming from?
Well, again, I think one of the things we need to focus on is how we spend our money. Again, you talk about the millions of dollars for the racetrack in Austin. That's not where we need to be spending money. You know, we talk about job growth, and we were talking about this earlier. You know, a lot of companies are moving to Texas, and we have something called the Enterprise Fund. And that's kind of one of the governor's things that he uses to get, he says, to get companies to come to the state of Texas. I think companies come to Texas because we are a right-to-work state, because we don't have a state income tax, and because we have great tort reform laws. I don't think it has anything to do with the Enterprise Fund. I think that enterprise fund should be used for some of these other things, education, for instance. And there was actually, we worked on an amendment to try to do that, but you know, unfortunately that didn't work out. But look at all these things that we're spending money on that I just don't think the state of Texas should be spending money on, especially where we're at right now with the budget. You know, our economy is going to come back at some point. It's already, we're up about $2 billion over this previous time last year. Well, 2011 over 2010. And a lot of that has to do with oil and gas prices. But, you know, as our economy continues to grow like that, you know, it's going to be a little slower. Again, I think there are probably 49 other states that wish they were in as good a shape as Texas was, even financially. So I think we just have to be better stewards of the money we have first. Second of all, you know, for me, as far as what the state does, we've got to change. I'll give you an example of Medicaid. In the state of Texas, the way we do Medicaid, we say somebody applies for Medicaid, and we give them the money. And then we say, should we have given them the money? Did they really qualify? And if we find out they didn't, then we'll go and say, would you mind giving us our money back? And they don't give us our money back. But what that does, that triggers the federal government, because in Medicaid, 42 cents comes from Texas, the state, and 58 cents comes from the federal government. Well, the federal government comes back to us and says, we want our 58 cents back, because y'all shouldn't have done that. And we waste millions and millions, I mean hundreds of millions of dollars in fraud that way. So we're coming up, and I don't know why it's taking so long, but we're coming up with ways and actually looking at different vendors where when somebody files a claim, we can check up front to see, do they qualify, and is this money that, you know, we should be spending before we spend it. And like I say, that can save us hundreds of millions of dollars in health care. You look at welfare and some of these things. You know, we have a system, and some of this is on a federal level, but you know, we have some in the state level too. A system that really, it kind of gives a hand out rather than a hand up kind of mentality, and it encourages inefficiencies, and so we need to address that. As a matter of fact, I co-authored a bill for zero-based budgeting, because the way we budget as a state, it you know, encourages inefficiencies, because what it basically does is say, you know, here is your budget, then, and all the agencies, they spend that budget and then come back the next session and say, well, we need more than that this session. And I've heard stories, you know, where you're getting approached to the end of the year and all the budget wasn't spent. So instead of rewarding people for running an efficient, you know, office, you know, that agency would go out and spend all that money so they could come back and say, oh, we're going to need more money because we spent all the budget last year. Instead of going to a zero base that says, you know what, once you start, instead of starting where you left off last year, once you start at zero, and tell us how much money you need. And so that would just increase efficiency. And I think we should have something that rewards agencies that do a more efficient job. You know, if they need X amount of money and they do a better job, then they shouldn't see it as a punishment for next year. They should see it, you know, where we can reward them in some way. And I don't know, I don't have that answer yet. But I think there's a lot of ways that we can still address a lot of inefficiencies, a lot of fraud, a lot of abuse in the system now. And I would rather start there than just, because if you're wasting 10%, if you increase taxes, then you're just wasting 10% of more money if you haven't addressed the waste part. So that's kind of where I want to address it first. And once we get a hold of that, then we'll get a truer picture of really what we need as a state to do our business.
You know, we, this last year, I think everybody in this room will agree that education got way underfunded. And somehow we've either got to come with a new system, a way to raise money, or figure out parts of education that are not going to get done in the future. Because if we continue the rate of growth of school systems in Texas, the rate of growth of the money to do those things for school systems in Texas, those two don't match, not even close. And when you start seeing school systems having to close schools because they can't generate the operating money to run the school systems, the school buildings and facilities that they have, somehow that doesn't seem productive, because education is the single most important thing to do in Texas. Has anybody ever thought about starting from zero based on education?
Well, I tell you, that you will see that being addressed. You know, as you're probably aware, the lawsuits that are all being filed, that's going to force us to do our job, which is fine. I mean, I think it's a shame that it takes a lawsuit to force us to do our job. This is something we should have already been addressing. But we were talking earlier, I was in a school finance meeting, and in the state of Texas, it's funded off what's called target revenue weighted average daily attendance, you know, and that's big complicated stuff. But that's how school districts get their money, and it's a per child payment. And the lowest school district in the state of Texas gets just over $3,900 per kid. The highest school district in the state of Texas gets over $13,000 per kid. And you have two issues. You have an adequacy issue and an equity issue. Now I can see between $3,900 and $13,000, there's obviously, we have an equity problem in the state of Texas. And I can see that, and I can work with that. And I was talking about this with Mr. Sheets, the adequacy thing, that's a little, for me at least, a little more difficult to get my hands around, because I don't know, nobody can tell me what adequate is. There's not a, you know, X amount is adequate.
Your wife can.
Well, yeah. So that's, for me, that's a little harder to get my fingers around. But I can easily get my fingers around the equity issue, and we've got a serious problem with equity. And I think before we address the adequacy issue, we should address the equity issue, because that's something we can do. And as we do that, that may allow the adequacy issue actually to come a little better into focus as you know, as we're building more equity in the system. I believe, and this is just Jim. I haven't talked with anybody, nobody's said anything necessarily, but the whole target revenue, hold harmless, recapture, all that kind of stuff, I think that will go away. Over a period of years, I think they'll you know, transform or transition from that system to more of just a straight formula funding type system, with the idea of bringing equity into it. They're going to revisit the whole franchise tax system, because everybody sees, you know, of the structural problem of the franchise tax. When we did the whole tax swap, that wasn't an equal swap. They took away more than they put back in. So everybody recognizes that, and so there's going to be that's going to be addressed this session too. You know, for me, I just want to make sure that rural schools have a seat at that table. It can be real easy to be dominated by, we talked about this, but, you know, the schools in Houston and Dallas and San Antonio and Austin, where you know, the big schools, and we need to make sure that we have somebody, you know, representing us as rural schools, and we've been promised that rural schools will have a seat at that table in this next session. So that's something to keep an eye on, because that's going to be something, that's going to be one of the significant issues that we're going to address this next session is school funding. And all those issues that the courts are coming up with. You know, but I tell people, don't get too encouraged, because we've been, you know, messing with school funding for decades, and apparently we haven't gotten it right yet. This last system, I think, was not even as good as the system before it, and so, you know, I don't want to give you too much hope that it, you know, this is the time that it's all going to be settled and fixed for good. But I hope it is. That's certainly what we're going to try to do. I think it's important that we get everybody to the table. Community leaders, administrators, teachers, counselors, parents. I think everybody has a vested interest. I mean, Victor and I, we're not teachers, we're businessmen, but we have a vested interest in our schools, because those are going to be our employees, and those are going to be the next business owners and the next employers in our community. So it's a vested interest all the way around. So, you know, that's going to be an important subject, and one that's, I think, is going to take a lot of time to get through. And I think you'll see some interim charges. You haven't yet, but I think you will see some interim charges to that degree, where people start working on that already.
As long as it's a state education system, and Muleshoe supposedly independent school district system. We've got a made-to-order head budding built in, don't we? And that's what's hard, I think. And it's funny, even right across the line over here at Sudan, you know, if you've got if you're a district that has a rural district even that has minerals or whatever, or you happen to have the SPS tote station or whatever they are now, or you have, you know, it's strange how there's that headbutting built in, you know, with equity is even hard in some of the smaller districts, you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because it's well, it's funny. It's just strange sometimes. I used to vote with Frisbees at the state convention, you know, for the, you'd hold a Frisbee up when you were a delegate for the, your school district or whatever. And I sat next to the delegate from Sudan, the ISD, and his Frisbee went up and my Frisbee went down and my Frisbee went up. And I'm thinking, we live together, you know, but we have different. So even equity's hard.
Oh, it's not gonna be easy.
But it is the most important thing that the state does.
Absolutely. And quite honestly, for education, I don't think the state should be doing education. They should just be funding it. Let the school districts do the education.
They got the money.
You know,
I'm gonna turn myself.
we should fund it and let school districts do it, in my opinion.
We talked a little bit about that, and you know, what is enough, and I'm not sure what the answer is, but a similarly situated school, you know, like Denver City and us, we're mirror images of each other. And we think whatever Denver City says is enough, that's enough for us. So I think
Go with them.
that's a fair way to do that.
Maybe you can solve it with a pipeline. Pipeline.
How do you feel about the structural deficit? In '05, whatever amount of money it was in education, in '05, we capped it and reduced the local taxes, and then made up for it with business franchise taxes. And we didn't make up enough.
Right.
So should we close the loopholes in the business franchise tax? Should we create more taxes? Or should we not bring it back up to the '05 level?
Well, personally, I would like to just do away with the franchise tax and property tax, for that matter, and go to like a consumption tax. And you know, I don't know if we're going to have enough people there that are willing to go that direction or not. But for basically, the way for me, taxes, it should be the lowest possible tax spread among the most people. I mean, that's just, you know, the way it should be. The franchise tax certainly is not that. You talked about the loopholes. I think there are 289, is that right? Like 289 exceptions to the franchise tax.
They keep adding.
And they keep, and they keep adding. And so it's not, you know, it's no surprise that it's not bringing in the money because you keep exempting people out of it. So I would just, you know, I would like to start at zero and do something else, because I don't think it's working now, and I'm not sure you can make it work, to be honest with you.
I agree with you.
So I would like to just scrap the system and go to, you know, a type of consumption tax. And quite honestly, I'm trying to get numbers on this. You know, you're talking about a consumption tax. It's 6.25 now. They say you could go to like 6.27. So 0.02%, and still raise more money than what the franchise tax is bringing in now. And you're looking at, was that $2 for every $1,000 you spend difference? You know, so it's, I think you could do that without really as big an effect on people and families and communities as the franchise would have, in the sense that, you know, those people that are paying franchise tax, it's harder for them now to expand and grow their business and hire more employees because they have this money that they're going to have to pay out there. So I think ultimately it would be better for everybody. That's the way I would like to see it go. And that's what I'm going to kind of push for in that area. But we do have to, I mean, we've got to do something. And that's one of the bad things about this budget that we passed. We did not fund any growth at all in education. And we all know that there's growth coming, and it's going to continue to come. Just, I mean, everybody hears the statistics: 1,000 people a day moving to Texas or whatever. All of those have kids, and so there's growth there that we're going to have to deal with it.
Well, we've written property tax to death, haven't we? I mean, that's basically almost antiquated because wealth no longer is invested in property. It's just in property. That's completely unfair.
Yeah, it's somewhat antiquated just by nature. Yeah.
Give me your position on the rainy day fund. Is there enough money there to do us some good if we can access it? Is it building?
It is building a little bit. You know, it's the oil and gas is what kind of funds that. And so, yeah, it's building a little bit. And we used some of the rainy day fund this last session because the comptroller's numbers for the previous budget, she didn't quite meet what the state didn't bring in. And I hate to say the state didn't make, because the state doesn't make anything. It takes. The state didn't take in as much money as was anticipated. And so we had about $3.5 billion of basically unpaid bills at the state level. And so we used that money to pay for that, because those are bills we owed that we didn't have the money for. We didn't use any more moving forward, and I wasn't a proponent of doing that for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you used all the rainy day fund this year for whatever you use it for, it continues all that on. Next year, all those, whatever you continued on is still there, but there is no rainy day fund because you used it all, and it doesn't grow that fast. And so the cuts you would have to make next time would be more severe than what we had to make this time. Number two, Obamacare. The Obamacare, what that does to the state of Texas, that's going to add about 1.5 to 2 million Texans to the Medicaid rolls. Our cost of that is going to be about $5 billion. And that's money that we don't have, we're not collecting. I mean, that's just brand new bill sent to the state of Texas for about $5 billion, if that goes through. And so knowing that was coming, we decided to hold some back, you know, for that. Now, the best case scenario is that gets repealed. And I don't know, Doc, I don't know how you feel about Obamacare and stuff, but in my opinion, the best thing about that is that gets repealed. And so then we will have some extra money in that rainy day fund that we can do some of these other things with. But I'm also not a big proponent of, you know, the proverbial kicking the can down the road type of deal. I mean, if we've got problems, let's just deal with the problems. Now, we didn't fully deal with the problems this time, in my opinion. We talked about, I mean, just our previous conversation about the structural deficit and the franchise tax and how that didn't meet expectations. So we still got some work to do in that area. But you know, I think it was the right decision at this point in time for the state of Texas overall to make sure we had some of that money back, you know, knowing that Obamacare, and I unfortunately don't see that being repealed. You know, we'll see how these next elections go, but you know, that would be a tough thing to get around. So we wanted to make sure we had some money available for that, because that could have, I mean, without that money available there and that hitting us, that could be very devastating.
What school would refer to as an unfunded commitment, I guess.
Well, I tell you, we talked about schools earlier. One of the ways that we can also help is, you know, trying to get rid of a lot of these unfunded mandates. I co-authored a bill that would make it illegal to, you know, pass a bill that was an unfunded mandate. Again, you know, that gets lost in people's committees and things like that. But I think that's that could be a way to at least try to help. You know, I co-authored the bill to postpone the STAR test because I didn't think, you know, one, I don't like the whole testing thing, but even more specifically now, the STAR test, just the expense to all the school districts of implementing the STAR test come at a time when we're cutting funding. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. But, you know, Austin sometimes is a common sense free zone. You have to check in your common sense when you enter the city limits sometimes, I think. I don't know. Because I don't understand what the big deal was. I mean, I know why it happened. Well, I'm not going to get into that. But, you know, so I think there's other things we can do as well to free up school districts to operate their schools and their communities that best suits their community. And I think we need to look at that as well.
When you have a passion like that you say, I believe in this, what do you do to get others to, you know, go along with that passion with you?
You know, I think at times passion is contagious. And if you can get around enough people, then they'll start, you know, catching the bug, I guess. But again, to me, again, this is me, I just think a lot of this stuff is just common sense. And I think, you know, genuinely in the legislature, and I'm sure there are a small handful of people that are using that for something else. But I think most of the people there are there doing what they genuinely feel is the right thing to do. Now, we disagree on what the right thing is, but they're not there, you know, most of them, out of spite or whatever. I mean, I think they really have a good heart. So I think the biggest thing is just talking to people. And I'll tell you, schools, kind of like agriculture, you talk to some of these guys and ladies from the urban, you say, you know, where does your food come from? Well, it comes from the grocery store. Well, no, it really doesn't come from the grocery store. It comes from West Texas. But, you know, so an education issue, because they don't understand, you know, they're in, I don't know how many kids are at Houston ISD. I mean, do you know? I mean, hundreds of thousands. I mean, I don't know. It's a completely, you know, they don't, you know, they can't take their focus off of that. So I think just a lot of it is just reaching out and educating people. Again, just trying to, I think passion's contagious, so I think if we can get enough people that are passionate about it, we can get some stuff done. So. And I tell you, it's interesting because a lot of this, a lot of bills are, a lot of legislation is done like through committee work. And you know, there are 150 state reps and everybody has a vote. There are, you know, depending on the committee, 9 to 24 or so committee members. And so really you have to, your first job is to convince the committee members, at least the majority of them. But if you can convince just the majority of the committee members, then you can take your bill one step further. Once it gets to the House, and I'll tell you, it's a funny story, but it's also kind of a scary story. I was sitting there, and there was a bill that came up. And basically what it did was, it said, and I understand, but this was an urban guy, and I understand what he was doing. The bill was, any kid that brings what they consider a weapon in their car to school, that's like serious stuff. They're expelled, it goes on their record. I mean, they made it really serious. And I understand as an urban person why they did it. But I asked him, I said, you know, I've got kids that they go from school to farm or ranch, and they'll carry a shotgun or something in their car to shoot snake. I mean, it's just a protection issue. I said, you're telling me that they're gonna, you know, get in trouble for this. And under his bill, I mean, yeah, they were. And so I voted against the bill, but there's a guy that, I shouldn't have said guy, because that narrows it down. But there's a guy that's been in the legislature for a long time, and he came up to me and he said, why did you vote no on that bill? And I explained it to him, and he goes, oh, I didn't realize that. He goes, man, I need to go change my vote. And he said, you know, and you kind of sit in little pockets on the floor, and where he was, it was, you know, he said, you know, a lot of us guys, we watch the way you're going to vote before we vote. And I'm thinking, you know, you've been here a long time, and you're, you know. But I think he did it for two reasons. Number one, he knew how conservative I was, and he wanted to be, you know, seen as a conservative as well. I'm not saying he's not, but probably not as conservative as I am, but he wanted to be conservative. But the second thing is, I read every bill on major state calendar before I vote on it. And a lot of these people, they'll just look at who the author was of the bill, and they'll go, oh, I know, you know, so-and-so, I've served with them for 8 years, they're good people, I'm sure I had to have a good bill, and they'll vote for it. Well, I don't do that. I read every bill before I vote on it, and they know that. And so
You must drink a lot of coffee now.
you know, interestingly enough, I don't drink coffee.
You lost my vote.
I don't drink coffee.
It's a character issue.
Yeah, that's true.
Do you have the biggest district now? Is the one in El Paso, Pete Gallegos district bigger than yours?
It is land-wise. county-wise.
But not counties?
I don't think county-wise.
Do you have the biggest, this will be?
The new Hardcastle, or what was Hardcastle's district, may be a county or two bigger.
Well,
So I think I'm second.
Where I'm going with this is that the reality of it is the more urban we become as a state. I mean, it used to be 80% of us lived in the rural area, 20%, lived in cities, and now that's yeah, it's flip-flop, but I'm going to guess it's even more than that. So we continue to, you represent, what, a couple 100,000 people?
That's 100, it's about 172.
Yeah. So the
200,000
density.
students in Houston.
200? Yeah, I know, it's a couple hundred.
Well, I mean, how do you keep the clout of the rural areas? I mean, okay, you're comparing. You have how many counties? 16 counties?
17. Yeah.
17 counties. A Houston representative can walk his
Sure.
I mean, it's blocks.
Sure. Yeah.
So how do you really realistically, how do we keep a certain amount of, I mean, used to we had a Speaker of the House, from Spring Lake Earth, Billy Clayton or Pete Lane, we've had a lot of clout, but now how do you consolidate some of that power and represent the interest of the rural communities? I mean,
Yeah, the biggest thing is just sticking together, all of us sticking together. And you'll see this, and you had Smithy, Chisholm, Swinford, Craddock, Laney, you had those guys that have been there for a long time. But they kind of all started about the same time too, just kind of like now it's Frulo and Perry and me and Price. The interesting thing though about this is, for me, we had a group of about 30 or so in our freshman class. I was number 7 in the class, seniority-wise. There have been, I think, 3 or 4 people ahead of me that have already said they're not coming back. So that jumps me up to about number 3 in the class. And they're expecting there's going to be another 30 to 40 new seats this session. So that automatically puts me in my second term as about equivalent to a 4-term representative, seniority-wise. But, we do it by sticking together, and I'll give you an example of that. Redistricting was a perfect example. When the first redistricting map came out, and you bring up a point, we need to keep as many state representatives west of I-35 as we can get. I mean, the first redistricting map came out, had us losing 3. The way they drew the map, we lost 3 state representatives. That didn't sit well with anybody, out here. And so we fought, and I went on TV, Charles Perry and I, we went on TV, we went on radio, we did newspaper interviews. I think I was in the New York Times. I mean, it was...
They actually pitted y'all together against each other.
They did, in the first map. And so, we took it out there, and we went and talked to the other representatives, Tryon Lewis and all those guys, and said, this is bad, and they recognize that. And so ultimately, the map that we came out, we only lose 1. And so we won that battle, but we did it just by sticking together. The good thing, there's a lot of state reps in Dallas, there's a lot in Austin. The thing about it, there's actually more in Houston alone than there are west of I-35. The good news is they can all get along. And Houston and Dallas don't all, get along. So where if we can all get along, which we do usually on any of the big issues that are going to affect us, we actually do have a voice in the saying it.
That's good.
So, but sticking together is important. But also continuing to build that seniority for, in another term or two, we'll be right back where we were with Swinford and Chisholm and all those guys that have been there forever. So.
Wouldn't it have been Franklin that said, if we don't hang together, we'll all surely hang separately?
Yep.
We're defending the Constitution.
Yeah.
That's good.
Discussion point, border security.
Mm-hmm.
We've got guys men and women that were hired to work our highways, and now they're having to be Navy officers. How many vessels is the department going to float in there along the border? We're doing a job that's not ours.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
This is a federal matter. We're defending a border here that needs to be defended by the military.
Mm-hmm.
and we're putting men and women down there on the border that were sworn to uphold the Constitution of this state and work the accidents and arrest the drunks, and now they're being turned into the Navy, and that doesn't set well. Those boats are not off the shoulder boats. They're specially equipped. They're fortified to take on what the cartels are throwing at them. And what we're seeing now is the flanking of that and coming through Arizona and New Mexico and into the Texas through the back door. How do we stop it? What's the approach?
And the bad thing is, it's a federal issue. You know, we can't pass immigration law just constitutionally. That's not something the state can do. I think we should be able to enforce it. But there's so much going on. For me, there's a couple of things that we need to do. And last year, we actually doubled the amount of money that the state spends on border security from, I think, 20 million to 40 million. Well, that's, you know, when you're looking at trying to, yeah, that's just nothing, to be honest with you. I think we can address it in a couple of ways. And I tell you, I went in toward the Rio Grande in one of those boats. We went up and down. And the interesting thing, the Rio Grande, there's like an imaginary line down the middle of the Rio Grande, and half of it's ours and half of it's Mexico. And I don't know why this is, but if they're in the water, even on our side, we can't touch them. Unless they get on land, we can't do anything. And we saw night vision kind of video. What these guys will do, somebody will come over and steal a truck on the American side. They'll back it up, they'll float the drugs over, load them in this truck, take off. They get met by law enforcement. They'll turn around, just drive back and drive the truck into the river.
Splash down.
And there's nothing we can do. And then, so all the drugs are floating, and they just pull the boat out there, load the drugs back in the boat, go back to the Mexico side, just wait and try again later. And there's nothing we can do about it. You know, so for the drug cartels, that's a completely different, that's going to take military involvement to stop that. And I'll tell you, these guys, I talked to DPS troopers down there, and Homeland Security people, and all these guys, and they said, you know, we dealt with the Russian mob, the Italian mob, the Chinese mob. They said nobody is as ruthless as these drug cartels. And, you know, they advertise. Those guys that are loading the drugs, they'll have Zetas, you know, on T-shirts on and stuff. I mean, they're actually advertising for their drug cartel. It's just brazen. And that's going to take military action of some sort to stop that. But for just other illegal immigration, just, you know, the guys that are coming over to work, a couple things we need to do, because we need to stop that too, because that's still illegal immigration. It's still breaking the law when you do that. I think the way you need to do that, number one, you need to make somehow need to make it a little more efficient and easier, because some of our industry depends on that labor force. And so I don't mind that as long as you do it legally. So however you can make it easier to get a work visa or whatever you need to do, I can support that. I have no problem with that. But we also need to take away incentives. All the incentives they get from coming over here. That kind of goes back to money too. Back in 2004, they did a study in incarceration, medication, and education of people who are in our country illegally cost the state of Texas, back in 2004, $6 billion a year. We had a $15 billion budget deficit. That's $12 billion right there. So, I mean, that's, even if, just on a pure economic reason, that's something that we need to address. But I think you address it by taking the incentives away, and then making it easier for those who do just want to come in. Now, with the drug cartels, that's going to take military action of some sort. And I don't know what the answer is, but yeah, it's not going to happen. Our guns have to be bigger than their guns to win that. I mean, there's no way around that.
But with them flanking and coming around the back door,
yeah.
Muleshoe is the back door.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I've had a briefing as late as yesterday that Lubbock's mentioned 3 times in it, and we're mentioned, Muleshoe specifically is mentioned in that congressional report twice. And when we go out competitive for grant funding to try and buy the equipment to combat this stuff, we're being scored against the CAPCOG and, you know, DFW airport, area. and they're getting to go and buy portable gun ranges that are on semi-trailers. When we're having to roll around in sagebrush and, fight the snakes and everything, learn how to shoot. But we can't get the equipment and the funding that we need to buy the equipment, i.e. video cameras, patrol rifles, thermal imaging. We can't get the grant funding to get that because we're competing against agencies like CAPCOG. And I mean, there needs to be, the grant system needs to be looked at as well and reevaluated, just like some of the things that are going on with school.
Are those state grants to the DPS? Or is that
No,
federal?
that's through the governor's office.
Oh, through the
CJD,
okay.
which is trickled down from the Fed. But it's all scored locally, but then the scores go to Austin, and the CJD in the governor's office looks at it to see if the locals got it scored right or not. And then they make the determination of who gets funded. And we've seen the majority of the funding being hung in and around CAPCOG in that 35 corridor. So there's, that's just another issue that we're looking at from this rural part of the state.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of difficult because you can't control the border with New Mexico. So if they're coming in through New Mexico and coming around, that's...
Well, the whole thing is that they're doing a lot of the Homeland Security money is going towards Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, Waco, Wichita Falls, back over to Houston, when in fact, right here, I'm closer to the most deadly spot on the U.S.-Mexican border. We're 4.5, 5 hours away from Juarez, and I can't get the funding. But in Dallas, they can. Because they're coming through here to go to Dallas.
Right. Now, if you could stop them here, then Dallas wouldn't need.
Well, there you go.
It's all easy.
Simple solutions to all the problems.
You don't have some bipartisan, like for our West Line 35, I mean, is bipartisan work between the legislators pretty good?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And, again, the people there generally are, they're just doing what they think is right. Sometimes we just have to convince them that what they're right is wrong. But yeah, it is, and there are a lot of issues, just like redistricting, that and actually, LA west of I-35, there just aren't a whole lot of Democrats.
Yeah, I wonder.
There's only just a small handful. And most of those are in El Paso, and we're not even sure that's part of Texas. They're in their own time zone, and that, they're good people, really good people. And you do, we work together. It's not, like I say, and you're going to have this no matter what. There's a couple that.
Well, the history is interesting, because you have your Pete Laney Democrats, you have folks that back then, my gosh, if you voted against Pete Laney and you lived here, you were an idiot, but then things changed.
Yeah.
And I just, curious.
That's still,
So is your district going from more of a north and south perspective, or to the east and west and then back down, or how's it?
Do you know what you're doing?
Yeah, it really goes from southwest to northeast. In between, you have Amarillo and you have Lubbock, and it kind of goes right through there. So, 17 counties. We crammed 170,000 people into 17 counties.
How many school districts?
I think around 60. Honestly, and then we've got 41s, 42. I mean, it works. Yeah, got it all. So.
You had talked about serving on the agriculture committee and with water and the drought being something we can't do anything about.
Right.
What have y'all talked about with the water?
Well, actually, we have a meeting. Are we in February yet? We have, I think, an interim meeting later this month to talk specifically about that. We haven't had interim charges. We haven't had an interim meeting yet on that. But we're going to do that, I think, later this month to talk about that. It's going to be a joint meeting with, I believe, Natural Resources, and we're going to talk specifically about that. My position on water is, there's a lot of focus on groundwater, but you know, there's not enough groundwater to solve the state's water needs. So we've got to be bigger than groundwater. I'm not sure why everybody is just rifling out on groundwater, but we got to do a bunch of stuff. As a matter of fact, I worked with a guy, with Representative Tracy King. He's a Democrat, but I worked with him on bills regarding rainwater harvesting. Which, of course, you have to have rain for that to work, but, you know, some parts of the states maybe. But, you know, when it rains here, we need to have the ability to take advantage of that. About, you know, to desalinate along the coast. He just actually finished one of the largest desalination plants in the nation, I believe, down along the coast. Start doing that. Looking at, you know, a possibility. It's a little too expensive now. We don't quite have the technology, but we need to give an incentive for somebody to figure out a way to clean brackish water. And if we can clean, we've got we got more brackish water than we could use. If we could figure out a way to clean it, make it potable, man, that would solve a lot of problems. Building a pipeline from the Mississippi over, you know, we have to develop. We have to actually bring new water resources into the state. We can't just depend on what we have now to solve all our problems. We've got to create new resources, and I think that's where we need to start focusing on. We will have a committee hearing on that, I think, sometime later this month, so it'll be interesting to talk about that. So.
Will there be any representation at the drought conference next week in Lubbock? It's on the 9th, I believe.
Is that in Lubbock or Amarillo? Is it Lubbock?
I thought it was in Lubbock.
The one Farm Bureau is putting on? Is that the one Farm Bureau's putting on?
With Soil Conservation and National Weather Service. And
see, I'm going to one, and it's somewhere around February 8th or 9th or 10th, somewhere in that area. I thought it was Amarillo. I thought it was Farm Bureau, but I could just be mixing up mine. You know, you look at my calendar, and it's.
Well, if I get you, I think I have your email. I can send you the.
Okay.
Because it was sent to me from the district coordinator from DPS, what used to be a regional liaison officer. She's going to send it to me. We were going to talk to him about our erosion that we have out south of town or southeast of town with the wildland fires we're at, and the blowing sand, and what we're going to do with it come this spring.
Yeah, it was probably just a week ago that I think I saw a lot of Muleshoe blow through plenty.
Yes, you did.
Yes, you did.
It's a big
With
issue.
the drought and the fires, et cetera, et cetera. That's bad.
So, but yeah, there is a drought conference coming up within the next week to 10 days that I'm going to be at. So. That's it.
We appreciate you being here.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Thank you so much for coming.
Anytime.
Jay, thanks so much for all your work.
Thank you, Jay.
Appreciate you. Thank you for being interested in our town.
Absolutely.
We are, and we're glad you're here.
Everybody's important.
We've got business cards and contact information here, and feel free to take it. Jim, in my dealing with him and his staff, they're responsive, which is nice. Now he knows where Muleshoe is, which is something new for us, and not for you, but for representation. And we're tickled with that.